This is awful. I mean, the closer you get to this, it just blows you back. And all I can think of is Bush saying, bring it on.
What's even more worrying is the fact that the parents don't know why their child has been arrested or where their child is being taken.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 25 cable stations from Vermont to New York City. On the internet at thestruggle.org. Our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We begin with a tribute to Tomas Young, an Iraq War veteran and resistor who died 2 days before Veterans Day. Then 2 interviews at the Tree of Life conference, one with Palestinian Ivan Karkashian, who talks about the disgusting treatment, mistreatment by Israeli soldiers and prison officials of Palestinian children. Then with Travis Harden, a Lakota, who recently went on a trip to Palestine. In 2004, 5 days after being assigned to Iraq, Tomas Young was shot in the spine and paralyzed for life. His health then became a series of plateaus and downward dips, though he did meet an amazing woman who married him and nursed him. He was one of the first vets from Iraq to speak out against the war. About 7 years ago, legendary talk show host Phil Donahue made a film about his life called Body of War. Last year, Donahue brought the film to New Haven and showed it on behalf of promoting enduring peace. And Donahue gave an introduction.
But since the movie was completed, Tomas went to the VA with a swollen right arm, and it hurt, and they gave him pain pills. And several days later, he was discovered in bed in a coma. Tomas sustained a pulmonary embolism, which, as you may know, means oxygen deprivation to the brain. So Tomas now struggles to speak. His speech is somewhat impaired, but you can understand him. It becomes less and less crisp as the day goes on, as fatigue sets in. He also lost his opposable thumb dexterity. So he can't hold silverware. He has to be fed. He recently had a colostomy, a heroic surgery, which puts the bag on the outside of the body, and he awakened from the surgery that he really hoped that this was going to relieve the significant discomfort that he had sustained. This is awful. I mean, the closer you get to this, it just blows you back. And all I can think of is Bush saying, bring it on. This is a classic example of what you can do if you frighten a nation. A smoking gun. It's amazing what you can do. He called me on a Saturday morning and said, I'm going to get off nutrient and I will allow myself to go away, as he put it. He was going to purposely end his life. Subsequent to that, I believe, I don't know what he'll be able to say. By the way, I'm told he's not well at all. We'll see Claudia, and I hope we'll see Tomas. Tom Morello went to Kansas City to do a concert for Tomas in Kansas City, which of course Tomas would be on the stage. And Tomas couldn't go across town to the venue for this concert. So this is how his life is going.
One of the sections of the film is Tomas Young and Phil Donahue watching a TV station presenting C-SPAN, which presents video of President George W. Bush making jokes about not being able to find the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Jokes about the supposed reason for the invasion and the cause of all the injury to Tomas Young and thousands of other Americans. After the film was shown, I asked Donahue about it.
I so much liked and was horrified, again, seeing Bush laugh about the missing weapons of mass destruction. It's unbelievable. I mean, this was after 2,000 dead, and so I couldn't find the weapons.
I flew to Kansas City alone and met a photographer there, a cameraman, just to do that. Just to film that scene. That was that was actually on the screen at the time that I was there, because it was, and what shocked me, it was not only the live telecast of the White House Correspondents' Center that night. They reran the Bush jokes, and that was real. That was Thomas. I mean, you have to be a fence post to think that this is funny.
Now, the two interviews I did in Harwich, Massachusetts, at the Tree of Life conference. The first is with attorney Ivan Karkashian about the horrendous treatment Palestinian youth get from the Israeli military. I'll be speaking to Ivan Karkashian from the Defense for Children International Palestine, who just gave a heartrending talk at the Tree of Life conference here in Cape Cod. Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
One of the things you were talking about was the difference in treatment of Palestinian children who throw stones versus an Israeli Jewish child who does the same thing. Could you repeat that?
Sure. So since 1967, the West Bank has been under military occupation and subject to military law. In the military law, there are security offenses, and one of those security offenses is throwing stones for Palestinians. Palestinian children caught throwing a stone at the separation barrier, for example, could face up to 10 years in prison. That's when you realize the military system in the West Bank is intended to control the entire population. But you also have...
Wait a second. Someone who could throw a rock at a wall could get 10 years.
Well, so if you're caught throwing a stone or a rock at a military object, and that's what the separation barrier is considered, or a military watchtower, for example, or a military jeep that's stationed, then you could face 10 years. If the military jeep is moving, or if you throw it at a person, then it's 20 years. Those are extreme sentences that are seldom applied, but what they do show is that this system is intended to control the population in the West Bank. That said, Israeli Jewish settlers who live in the same area, who live in the West Bank, are not subject to military law. They're subject to Israel's civilian legal system and civil criminal law. And under that system, there is no offense of throwing stones. If you throw a stone and you're an Israeli Jewish child, and you cause property damage, then you're charged under the various vandalism laws. But you're not charged for the mere act of throwing a stone the same way a Palestinian child is. And so often when you see clashes between Israeli Jewish settler youths and Palestinian youths, the Palestinian youths will get completely rounded up, whereas the Jewish youths can go home after the clash. And part of the reason also why that exists is because the Israeli military is not there to control the Israeli Jewish settler population. They're there to control just the Palestinian settler population, and they have no authority as a military to arrest a civilian. And that's what Israeli Jewish settler children are considered, and Jewish settlers in the West Bank considered civilians under Israel's legal system, and the military has absolutely no authority over them. And so they get away with anything that they do without any repercussions, and the Palestinians get rounded up and arrested.
You showed a video of a recent video of a kid who was taken by soldiers, a small child who people in the area said had mental problems and so on. And it was disturbing, but what you told afterwards about the routine treatment of a kid who is blindfolded and so on. Could you talk about that?
Sure. So children are often, the vast majority of children, 60% of them, are arrested for stone throwing. They're not arrested during the day. We find that over half of them are actually arrested in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 a.m. And we're talking about children as young as 12. And they're taken, their plastic ties are put around their arms, blindfolds, they're escorted to a military jeep, sat on the metal floor of the military jeep with soldiers on benches. And the soldiers on the benches looking down on these children on the metal floor begin to abuse them verbally or physically. And we've had disturbing cases where soldiers found an empty beer bottle in the military jeep and used it to smash it on the head of a kid. We've had incidents where soldiers would be smoking cigarettes and extinguish them on the arms and lips of children. And then because it's the middle of the night, the interrogators that are there to interrogate the children are not ready to show up for work yet. So children are transferred to a military base where they're kept outdoors oftentimes or in a small dirty room, sometimes with a military dog. And throughout that period, they're denied access to water, food, or toilets. If the children ask for any of these things, they face further abuse. And also they're strip searched multiple times during the arrest process, all humiliating and terrifying the child. What's even more worrying is the fact that the parents don't know why their child has been arrested or where their child is being taken. So essentially, when a 12-year-old, 13-year-old child gets arrested, he disappears for a period of 24 hours, and a 14 and 15-year-old child disappears for a period of 48 hours. And if you're 16 and older, if you're 16 and 17, then you disappear for up to 96 hours, where your parents have no idea where you are or why you've been arrested.
Now, I assume you've complained about this, your organization. You ever get any satisfaction? Anyone ever get punished? Anything get changed?
So our organization, which is made up of attorneys that represent around 25% of Palestinian kids caught up in the military court system, military detention system, submits multiple complaints on their behalf every year. We've never gotten a good resolution, not once. Part of the problem for that is if the complaint is against the military refuses to have that child complaining of being abused by the military to have his attorney present while he's giving his testimony. So they expect the child to go to the same system that abused him and testify without the protections of an attorney by him. And that's where we draw the line. We don't want to re-traumatize the kid by having him retestify.
Wait, they want the kid, the little 12-year-old kid, to be surrounded by Israeli soldiers again?
By the Israeli military prosecution and the military police, and to testify against the person who abused him, who would be in the room, and that child would be completely alone in that room. We wouldn't have his attorney by his side as a sort of protection. And the idea of having to face your abuser in the same system that abused you and to raise your voice, most children would be too scared to do that because they think they'll invite further abuse if they're ever caught up again in the same system. And so that's where we've drawn the red line. And accordingly, the Israeli prosecution, military prosecution, says we're not cooperating with the investigation and there isn't therefore enough evidence, and they close the investigations without anyone being held accountable.
What about interrogation? You talked about kids being interrogated. Could you talk about that here?
Sure. So children are strapped to a low, small metal chair. They're shackled. Their legs are shackled. Their hands are shackled. And usually you get 1 to 2 interrogators, sometimes playing good cop, bad cop on the child. These are extremely professional police or intelligence interrogators trying to coerce a confession out of a child that's been primed to give a confession from the horrendous circumstances under which he was arrested and transferred for interrogation. During interrogation, if the child doesn't cooperate, they start verbally abusing him, screaming at him, intimidating him. And if that doesn't work, there's some form of physical abuse that comes into the picture. And if that fails, they'll place the child in solitary confinement until they get a confession. And just to be clear, solitary confinement is a very, very small 2x4 cell with no windows or any natural light coming into it. There's a dim yellow light that's kept on 24 hours a day. There are protrusions from the wall so that the child can't rest.
These are kids being treated.
These are 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Just to be clear, Defense for Children International Palestine considers anyone under the age of 18 as a child, and that's according to international law. And these.
What about a right not to talk? I mean, in the United States, you know, on every TV show, they have a right to remain silent.
Yeah.
What about that?
So that's the only right that actually exists under military law for these children, but they're seldom advised of that right. So in fact, the interrogators would tell them if they were to confess very quickly, then they would be let out faster. Of course, the children aren't given access to an attorney prior to the interrogation, don't have an attorney present during the question, and they don't even have a parent present during the questioning. So they're alone. They don't know that anyone's out there looking after them. And under those circumstances and under that kind of treatment, solitary confinement and the coercion, most children confess whether they did something or they didn't do anything. And importantly, actually, and this point I'd like to add is oftentimes the interrogators typing up the child's statement, we find that in 1 in 5 cases, that statement is written in Hebrew and the child is made to sign it when the child doesn't even understand the language or what he signed. So they often sign confessions that they haven't read and haven't even understood. So, and those confessions are used to convict these children.
Now, are you based in West Bank or Gaza, or where are you?
So Defense for Children International Palestine has its headquarters in Ramallah, but we have offices also in Hebron and Nablus, and then we have field workers in East Jerusalem and in Gaza.
Now, you know, for 50 days or so, Gaza was in the headlines every day, and then ceasefire, and boom, we're on to something else. But you mentioned, I mean, just to jump to a completely different topic, you said there's something like 300,000 mental injuries in Gaza?
Not mental injuries. There's about 373,000 children that have been traumatized by the latest offensive on the Gaza Strip. These children require psychosocial support. And what's important here to realize is that vast number is only part of the problem, because a lot of these, there are far more children who have been traumatized from previous offensives, and there's a situation where we find children continually being re-traumatized to the point that they've had the psychosocial support before, and it hasn't saved them, because the next military offensive, they'll be faced with the same situation. So it's a very difficult situation for humanitarian aid organizations and people trying to get the necessary help for these children, because ultimately they realize if another offensive were to take place, it puts them back to square one and then adds to the problem further, because you're only traumatizing further people. And I'd like to mention the case of the Abu Jamer family. They had an 8-year-old child there who survived the 3 offensives, one in 2006, in 2009, and then in 2012, only to die in the latest offensive as an 8-year-old. And he died along with 18 other children from his same family. And so when you think of the surviving children of that family and what they must think, it's just the trauma is mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is all mind-boggling. Tell me a little bit more about your organization. How long has it been around?
Sure. So Defense for Children International Palestine was established in 1991 as a strictly legal aid organization to provide free legal aid to children caught in the military detention system. The way it happened is our founder was in prison himself. As a political activist, and he realized when he was in prison that there were no protections for children in the Israeli military detention system. They were being treated exactly as adults. So when he was released, he established Defense for Children International Palestine. And then in 2000, we expanded to begin monitoring all violations by the Israeli side against Palestinian children. And in 2005, we expanded yet again to monitor all violations by the Palestinian side against Palestinian children, and to also provide legal aid for Palestinian children caught up with the Palestinian law or in conflict with the Palestinian law itself. And at that point became a fully fledged Palestinian children's rights organization defending children from violations by any perpetrators, whether they be Israeli or Palestinian.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity.
Now, sections of an interview with Travis Harden, who is of Lakota and other Indian ancestries. We talk about his activist family and his trip to Palestine. I'll be speaking with Travis Harden, who is a singer, dancer, and teacher, presenter, and artist. We heard him sing at Yale and at Old Lyme, and it was really amazing. Could I ask you first your nation?
I am from the Lakota Nation, which is from the Minikoju and Yankton bands of the Lakota, and I'm also from the Ho-Chunk Nation, which is called the Winnebago tribe.
And where were you born?
I was born in the capital of South Dakota, where my mother was working at a Indian school that's located in Pierre, South Dakota.
And I understand you went to Alaska. Your family took you there.
Yes, my mother transferred her job up to Alaska when I was 5 years old, where she remarried a full-blooded Tlingit man that adopted my mother into the Raven clan. And I learned how to hunt and fish from the best as I grew up in fishing and hunting in Alaska.
And I understand you're a nephew of Russell Means, the activist?
Yes, nephew of Russell Means, Ted Means, Bill Means, and Dace Means. Our whole family was involved in the American Indian movement, and then later on worked at the Black Hills Alliance, where we had to kind of forget about the racial issue, and we had to join forces with the non-Indians to fight for a very important issue that was the proposed strip mining of our sacred Black Hills in South Dakota. In order to mine the Black Hills, they would probably have to build a mill, which would need hundreds of thousands of gallons of water per minute to run, which would be our Lakota aquifer, which is underneath the ground, and that's our water for our reservations. And if that got contaminated or ruined, that would be our water source. And so it was a very important issue, and we worked together, and we beat it. We got the people.
What year was that around?
This was around 1980, 1981, where we did beat it, and we got the people to vote against the proposed strip mining. But I hear that they're trying to bring that issue up again, and we might have to go to war against that again.
Now, when we talked earlier, you said that your politics mostly came from Ted Means, your uncle, and that he was involved in a confrontation or at Custer Courthouse, but I don't know anything about that. Could you tell us about that? There
was a trial going on at the Custer Courthouse for American Indian Movement members, and one thing led to another, and it was a riot, and they burned down the courthouse, and a lot of people went to jail and got beat, and they literally tried to hang my uncle on the stairs, anyway, he ended up having to serve prison time for being one of the leaders of that demonstration.
Okay, you're here at this conference about Palestine. Your shirt says Palestine. When did you first get aware of this or interested?
Well, I met David Good like 20 years ago or so, and the Old Lyme Congregational Church has been coming to our reservation for 29 years. This next summer will be the 30th year that they have come to help us, and they come and buy us art from us, our artists around the Cheyenne River Reservation, which is it's hard to survive as an artist, but there's a lot of us, so they really help us out. And so I've been coming out here to Old Lyme and teaching children, and one time I came and brought my sons to teach the school front store in New York, which is about 37 black children from Harlem, and I've come out for different art things and teaching, singing to the children in Old Lyme and sharing our culture with our sister church from Greengrass. And so that's how I've been coming out. And so finally, David, he knows what my singing presence can do, and so he thought that this would be a good opportunity for me to go see what's going on and sing and present at these conferences and share the struggle of their people and our people.
So you went to Palestine this year?
Yes, I just came back from visiting Palestine and different camps, different places and towns, and it was hard for me to see all that, and it made me cry sometimes because I'd see the children, and it just reminded me of our people, exact same thing. It's almost like that 7th Cavalry flag waving in the wind again, and I really don't. They use our native names, and they use our culture sometimes for operations and names. For example, the Apache helicopter that's bombing and shooting and killing innocent people and children and elders. And I don't think Geronimo or the Apache people would appreciate what that helicopter does to people and a nation.
When you were there, what are some of the places you went to, things that impressed you?
Hebron, I went to Beit Zahol.
Yeah, that's close.
I was in Jerusalem and Bethlehem, and I can't remember or pronounce some of the other places I went to, but I saw the water problem where they would dam the water, so there used to be a water flowing down, and children would even swim in it, and now it's all dried up. And
please check out our podcast interview with Jess Oden about Rasmia Odeh, her imprisonment, and the refusal of the judge to hear about her torture at the hands of the Israelis. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this is The Struggle.
When the world has gone crazy and it's all becoming clear, when they're gunning down our comrades and it seems the end is near, as they're loading up the launchers for the tear gas grenades, we can take off our bandanas and kiss behind the barricades. When it's madness all around and you can see this at a glance, we will sing and we will cry, we will laugh and we will dance as they shout their marching orders beneath the helicopter blades. We shall seize the moment for a kiss behind the barricades. They will try to break our spirit, and at times they may succeed, but our love for the world is stronger than their greed. When the building is surrounded and hope begins to fade, in my final hour, a kiss behind the barricades. As the movement grows, there will be hills and bends, but at the center of the struggle are your lovers and your friends. And the more we hold each other up, the less we can be swayed. Here's to love and solidarity, and a kiss behind the barricades.